Hi, my name is Doyle, and I'm going to present this video essay on the phenomena and construction of the belief of the Mother Goddess. I'm going to delve into 3 or 4 main cases which archaeologists have said to be evidence of Mother Goddess phenomena, and that these pieces are Mother Goddess statues, figurines, figurettes that have been found over the 1800s. I'm going to work through the myth and debunk the belief of the ongoing debate of whether or not this is actually a real phenomena and a real cultural belief that happened. This Mother Goddess phenomena also fits into the issue of another idea in archaeology that's also controversial, of the progress narrative and the belief that we as the world and a society have progressed and advanced in our civilization. A lot of the Mother Goddess ideas surround the idea that we were once in a matriarchal society and have progressed and advanced and gotten better in our civilization to be in a patriarchal society. This progress narrative fits into the idea of there being a matriarchal or Galenic society before, wherein sexual promiscuity was encouraged. It was a massive thing at the time, and where, because of this, male archaeologists have determined from evidence that these figures show evidence of this progression from these kind of matriarchal, more equal societies to a better patriarchal society. Because in these matriarchal societies, there was too much sexual promiscuity, as you can see from the emphasized sexual features of the many of the figurines I'm showing. In the original evaluation and analysis of these figurines, there was no room for any other kind of interpretation other than the fact that because their sexual features, their fertile features were emphasized and had a lot of detail on them, that all they could be were fertile beings who symbolized this extreme fertility, and thus were put into the idea of being a mother goddess. There was nothing else to these women or figurines other than the emphasis on their reproductive organs and fertile features of their bodies. These interpretations were held up for decades until into the late 1900s. People started to go back over it and started questioning if there was any evidence for this. And so there's still an ongoing debate today about whether there actually was a culture and phenomena of Mother Goddess back in the prehistoric stage. Whilst there is a lot of figurines that seem to suggest and fit into these boxes of fertile goddess, motherly figure, there's no evidence, there's no written evidence to suggest any of this. It's all just shown as evidence because it fits into the narrative that these white male archaeologists created of a fertile mother. All of the evidence used by these archaeologists and supporters of the Mother Goddess phenomena is very circumstantial. It can all be interpreted in many different ways. And so because of this, there's no real way to deny or say that it isn't a true thing, but there's also no evidence to suggest that it is a true thing. It's all based upon personal interpretation and using one's own ideas and contemporary ideas of the time in which they found it in the 1900s, in which they impressed upon these figurines from centuries ago. So I question how real and how authentic are these ideas? And within this debate, I would argue that these ideas and the existence of a mother goddess fertility culture in the Neolithic and prehistoric period is false. And I believe that it's just an impression put upon these statuettes and figurines from male archaeologists who were impressing their own ideas of their contemporary time onto these decades old figurines. Hi, I'm back often, and arguably you can trace back the Mother Goddess phenomena and origination of the idea to my book, The Mother's Right. I spoke about in this book about how I believed that all of society, political, religious, and social, all started off in a matriarchy, or at least a lot more of an equal world. In this society, I believed that the foundation of religion from the earliest of times is the religion of the mother. The social order originally emanated from woman, and society was founded upon the bond of mother and child. All myths emerge from the transformation of the primeval mother image. The transition from nature to culture begins with the emancipation of the woman. Matriarchy must pass into patriarchy. The reign of the father succeeds the reign of the mother. That's progress. Matriarchy is the chrysalis out of which the social order and culture of the father's rule have emerged. I didn't explicitly say that matriarchal was worse and patriarchal was better. I did link the changing of matriarchal to patriarchal in part of the progress narrative. And as part of the progress narrative, I insinuated that the patriarchal society was an advancement and improvement of society, and that we were growing, civilizing, getting even more advanced by going to a patriarchal society instead of this matriarchal one where there was too much sexual promiscuity, it was too much about women, everything revolved around the mother as a reproducer. I actually got into this idea of the progress narrative from my two besties, Tyler and Morgan. Let's have a look at them. Lewis Morgan and I wrote Ancient Society, a little book on how society's progressed and gone more civilized and ultimately advanced over time. One of my favorite quotes from my book that I think really works into this narrative is the evolution of human society from an archaic to a civilized condition has been accompanied by a gradual increase of the powers and function of government and by an enlargement of the functions of gens, frati, and tribe, and of the patriarchal family. Get that in there, you know I love men. I mostly just wrote about how we grew and progressed and advanced, just got better and better and better. And I think that Bachofen and other people really liked my work because it really fit into their idea of moving from a matriarchal or uncivilized, undomesticated kind of tribal era to civilized, very, smart, advanced, patriarchal society. Because we can see the correlations clearly. Because when we were matriarchal or even just equal, we were uncivilized. When we moved to the patriarchal, so civilized. We started making work. We started getting smarter. Just think about it. So there really is a correlation, I think. Over to you, Tyler. Thank you, yes. I am Eva Tyler. I, again, also, like Morgan, wrote on the advancement of society and progression of society, getting better, from barbarism, from, what was going on back there? No structure, no clear, coherent thought, nothing like how it should be. My favorite quotes from my book that must have inspired people like Bachofen and archaeologists that came after me and came up with these kind of ideas when finding artifacts based on my work is quotes such as, political development stands out clear and definite in the line of human progress. From early groups where power is barely divided, matriarchal to highly organized states, and that's the patriarchal. Like Morgan, I never explicitly said anything about matriarchal to patriarchal, but it was in the fine lines. Favorite bangers from my book was civilization appears to be the natural heritage of humanity and to be gained by normal processes of human growth. So it's completely natural and normal that we should go from this matriarchal society, which wasn't very good, to a patriarchal one that we have now in the Victorian era. I, as well as Morgan, wrote our books in the 1870s, and we really did spread this idea of progress narrative that was already building up even larger with our books. But since then, people like Bachofen and people like Melhart, archaeologists, especially in the 20th century, were using our ideas to back up their archaeological finds. When they looked at artifacts, they had our ideas of the progress narrative in the back of their heads. I'm currently in Sydney, Australia, but let's travel over to Katahoyuk to see how it all began and where my interest in this topic began. And away we go! Hi, I'm an archaeologist. My name is James Mallard, and I've done a lot of research and work on the seated woman of Ketahoyuk, or as I like to call her, the Mother Goddess. Let's go have a look at her now. Hi, I'm just a seated woman. No, you're not. You're a Mother Goddess. What? Why? Well, because there's a complete absence of sex in any of the figurines, and sex in art is invariably connected with male impulse and desire. If Neolithic woman was the creator of Neolithic religion, absence of sex is easily explained and a different symbolism was created in which navel, breast, and pregnancy stand for the female principle. Where is the evidence to suggest that? It's the 1960s, and right now, the standard societal perfect body type for a woman is not that. So, it must have been a matriarchal society, because how else would men have been attracted to something like this? If art is so connected to male sexual desire, then it must have been made in a matriarchal society, because no man would ever praise or look at a body like this and think of it in a sexual way. It must be about fertility instead then, because that's the only two things women can be, either a sex object or a fertile mother object. Madonna whore complex. Another side note and aspect to this video essay that I find interesting is the male perception of the ideal body type, because a lot of these men writing in the 1900s and throughout the 1900s, I would argue, just assumed that their perceived societal perfect body type was always the perfect body type, which is simply not true, because obviously women are always impressed upon by society with the perfect body type of what they should be for men and what men find attractive. But ironically enough, this ideal body type for women changes every single decade. It changes all the time. When these male archaeologists say her body type, it's a very fertile one, it's obese or very large breasts or large hips, there are points in time where that was the perfect body type and still is, and it's just determined by society as to what it is in that point in time. The times they're writing, this wasn't the body type. Why is it that because a woman has a certain body type, it shows or means anything about who she is or the time in which she was created? I question why, because they have large breasts or large hips or large stomach, why is that automatically associated with fertility, and why is that automatically associated with sexual features rather than just being a presentation of the woman's body at the time? Why is it that these male archaeologists place their contemporary societal beliefs of what a woman's perfect body should look like on decades, thousands, years old artifacts and figurines from completely different societies, from prehistoric societies? I have no idea about what the body type was then, or even if there was a societally pushed upon body type that women were meant to look like and be. I find it really ironic the way that these men assumed that because our society has what women should be and what women should look like and do, they must have had it years ago before they even wrote. They must have had these societal ideals of women's body types then. Not only just that, but that they must be the exact same ideal body types and body types meaning certain kind of things as the ideas that we have now in the 1900s. This is so reductive. There's no evidence for any of it. It's based solely in their own personal ideas. They could have looked back at just decades before then, and the body type was what a lot of these figurines looked like, and it was sexualized by men rather than being a fertile and a motherly figure. They impress what they associate with different kinds of women's body types and the society that they were living in with figurines from years ago, from a whole other period of time, from prehistoric times. That is the funniest part of all of this, in my opinion. Get me out of Ketahoyuk and get me to Knossos to look at our next mother goddess. This is a snake goddess, and we're going to be speaking to Sir Arthur Evans, who was the one who discovered these figurines and was the one who actually termed it a goddess in the first place. Away we go! Evans saw these snake goddesses. And what else could it mean other than a society that worshipped a mother goddess? Because these snake goddesses, they were all around, had to be a matriarchal prehistoric society. Evans has been extremely criticized for having no evidence at all. That's the same with his interpretation of the figurines as snake goddesses, linking them to mothers and fertility. For example, Lapitin argued that Evans' interpretations are based on Victorian notions of prehistoric matriarchy, which is exactly what I've been saying all throughout this video essay. And again, this all goes back to the same thing that these archaeologists who found it have, is that there's no evidence. There's circumstantial evidence, which they've taken and put their own ideas and contemporary notions from their times onto, but it's just a base artifact. There's nothing else to suggest any of these ideas of a matriarchal prehistoric society. Once again, whilst there is always the chance that they might be right, I disagree and would argue that all of this is based on not enough evidence at all to suggest what they are suggesting and giving as truth, and gave as truth for decades. Another interesting aspect of these interpretations by these original archaeologists is that whilst they have been criticized for being sexist far later on in the late 1900s and for being not found in evidence, they were already being reinterpreted in also unevidence-based interpretations. For example, Castleton argues that Evans was wrong and that it's not a snake goddess, but instead it's a snake priestess. He argues that it was a matriarchal theocracy and that they looked up to these snake goddesses as religious figures and priestesses rather than goddesses. For example, Castleton says that the snake goddess, her high priestess, ritually and ecstatically transformed into an epiphany of the goddess, in which he's critiquing Evans' original interpretation of the snake goddess as a goddess rather than a priest. Other interpretations of the snake goddess come from Doyle, who argues that instead of representing goddesses, they represent mourners, which was a typical thing with women who had exposed breasts. Wonderlike goes on to say that Knossos was actually a whole place of mourning and death, and actually called it a necropolis, meaning a vast tomb. He went with a far darker interpretation of the snake goddess than Castleton and Evans, who went with a far more loving, gay, happy society, which they imagined from their own interpretations of the snake goddess as a priestess or a goddess. So as you can see, there's a lot of interpretations of these Neolithic figurines, and the reason there's a lot of interpretations is because there isn't evidence to suggest or completely comply with any of their interpretations. There isn't enough evidence because there's no written words, there's not a lot of other findings from the times, and other findings from the times also don't have enough evidence. But regardless, Evans and other archaeologists of the time still wanted to place these figurines into a long narrative of there being a culture of a mother goddess around Europe and the Neolithic prehistoric societies. But once again, that's just it. It's all an idea that they perpetuated and put out. We can't ever really know whether there was a mother goddess culture and belief that was spread across these different societies and cultures, because there's no evidence. So that's why I would argue this is a false interpretation, or at least not concrete enough or having enough evidence to actually prove and make a substantial argument and claim because of the lack of evidence. Now that we've spent some time in Knossos, let's get our way all the way over to Willendorf to go look at the Venus figurine. Why am I a Venus? What about me makes me a Venus? What evidence suggests that I'm a Venus? Hi, my name is Obermeyer, and it was I who first termed the figurine. I personally called it a Venus of Willendorf because for many, many years, archaeologists had been terming and labeling figurines and statuettes of women's naked bodies. It was correlated to goddess Venus, a goddess of love. However, this Venus of Willendorf, a lot more attributed to the mother goddess phenomena, because of the intricacy and emphasis placed on the figurines, breasts, and hips. Because of this, it was once again interpreted as being a mother goddess figure and being of fertility. This Venus of Willendorf really does have a lot of intricacy, has a lot of importance and effort placed on body parts of women are typically associated with fertility. So for example, there's a lot of detail and focus on the breasts of the woman and of the pubic area and of the hips, whereas the arms and the head and the legs are not as important or as emphasized or put into as much detail with the sculpting of it. Whilst we're on the topic of the Venus of Willendorf and the concept of the Venus figurines, although a lot of these aren't wholly determined as mother figures or fertile figures, a lot of them have been ascribed this way. So, for example, Venus of Hohenfels, Venus of Dolmy-Vestons, and Venus Imperduc. Obviously, this has been critiqued. Art historian Christopher Whitcomb said the ironic identification, I agree, of these figurines as Venus pleasantly satisfied certain assumptions at the time about the primitive, about women, and about taste. And that's exactly what I've been arguing. It once again fits into the narrative of how it was a matriarchal society and that these kind of figurines emphasizing women's bodies and their breasts and their fertile features was something primitive and in the past. We've progressed from that now. Again, about women, about how figurines were only shown for their fertility, and it's only thought of through the idea of a male gaze. It's only thought of through a male perception of it, rather than a female perception, which would take perhaps an entirely different interpretation of such figurines, and not one of, oh, she has enlarged features, so she must be a fertile figure, and she must have been worshipped by women as a man would never want to worship this, or if it was worshipped by a man, it must have been in a sexual way because everything is for male desire. There isn't consideration of any other interpretations or possible meanings, and it's only what these male archaeologists believed and put forward as truth because likely didn't consult any women about these interpretations or ask any women. And so it's a completely male interpretation. The final figurine I'll be looking at, an artifact I'll be looking at, is the Sleeping Lady of Malta, who once again has been described as Mother Goddess or a fertile figure simply because of her enlarging body. Let's go and check out Malta. Hi, I'm literally just a sleeping woman, found in a grave. Oh! All of a sudden, I'm a symbol of fertility. What? What? All of a sudden, I'm part of a mother goddess phenomenon? What's going on? Now, whilst the original discoverers of the Sleeping Woman of Malta weren't the ones who labeled her as a part of the cult of the mother goddess cult, many other scholars and archaeologists and anthropologists and historians did later on. And one of the most major of these was Christina Biaggi, who said the worship of the great goddess was universal from the Upper Paleolithic to the Late Neolithic in Europe and the Near East, and that the Maltese goddess figures represented the very stylized visual manifestation of that worship in Malta, wherein essentially she's linking the Sleeping Lady of Malta to this cult of the mother goddess. What's really interesting, though, about this mother goddess phenomenon is Gimbutas's work on this phenomenon. Because although coming from a very sexist, in my opinion, standpoint, where it was viewed as less civilized matriarchal society, Gimbutas in the 70s really switches up his narrative, and although still perpetuating, pushing forward the idea that there was a mother goddess cult that went across the different societies and different civilizations in Europe, in the Neolithic and Paleolithic eras. She argues this from a far less negative light, wherein this mother goddess phenomena is not something that we've advanced from and gotten better from, but just the fact that it was something that did exist. Her evidence for this comes from her comparing the similarities between different fertile images of women across different cultures in Europe at the time and throughout centuries, and how they all have similar emphasized features of their bodies, such as their breasts, their pubic area, their hips, their stomachs, and so on. However, she goes even further and says that these mother goddess figures were actually deities in this matriarchal culture and societies that were all around Europe in the prehistoric period. Even goes as far as to say that this mother goddess is the creation of life. In representing fertility, she actually was what those cultures believed created life and made humans and made the earth and connected it to cosmology. And to further this argument that she has, she referred to different spiritual practices of people in these times worshipping female goddesses and female deities. However, once again, all of this evidence is very circumstantial and can be interpreted in many ways. And this is just one of the ways that Gimbutas interpreted it. However, she has been criticized for her universality of this belief and how she's been applying it to almost all European cultures from the time and societies from the time, because once again, there isn't strong evidence to support her point, and it is once again dependent on her own interpretation of the evidence found in these sites. For example, Gimbutas's main idea on what this mother goddess is she says, according to the myriad images that have survived from the great span of human prehistory on the Eurasian continent, it was the sovereign mystery and creative power of the female as a source of life that developed into the earliest religious experiences. The great mother goddess, who gives birth to all creation out of the darkness of her womb, became a metaphor for nature herself, the cosmic giver and taker of life, ever able to renew herself within the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. However, once again, there is no evidence to support this. Gimbutas argues the Sleeping Lady of Malta is just another example of the universalism of this cult of the Mother Goddess. But all they're doing is just finding figurines and statuettes that fit into this idea of the Mother Goddess that's been created. As I've said, a lot of these interpretations were just taken as fact. That's a very prevalent thing that happened in archaeology in the 1700s, 1800s, and early 1900s, because these white male European archaeologists who were upper class in society and well respected, their opinions and interpretations were just taken as fact. These interpretations went unquestioned until the 1950s, until more people started to look back on this cult of the Mother Goddess and start trying to see what evidence these scholars and archaeologists really had on this cult that they were presenting as fact. A couple of these sources are Newman's The Great Mother or James's The Cult of the Mother Goddess, where they both go in depth evaluating the Mother Goddess phenomena. Newman focused on more of it being a psychological process, which throughout history in different societies, regardless of communication between them or not, they all had this similar notion of a mother goddess, whereas James looked at it in a comparative and comparing the different cultures and the different ways that they represented mother goddess phenomena. However, both of these still pertain to believing that there is a mother goddess phenomena and that there was a cult of the mother goddess across Europe and across the Neolithic and Paleolithic periods, still without suggesting that perhaps there is no evidence and that this is just a made-up cult phenomena belief. I also want to explore the idea of how this mother goddess trend and this mother fertile symbol for women has been extremely impactful and is seen all throughout history. One of the main places that we see this is in the Christian Bible, which has really exacerbated the idea of women as having only two roles, as being this mother fertile figure or being a promiscuous, overtly sexual woman. We can see this in a lot of the images of Mother Mary, where we can see how her breasts are normally exacerbated and enlarged, how she's always holding a child or near a child. And we can see that this has also exacerbated the idea of a mother goddess phenomena. Finally, the last source that I'll be looking at is Andrew Fleming's article, The Myth of the Mother Goddess. This is one of the first publications in which someone actually agrees with my opinion that this mother goddess phenomena, this mother goddess cult, is exactly that, a myth. Some of the most important quotes from Fleming's article is this: "There is no a priori reason why a similar burial rite should represent belief in the same deity. The idols have become articles of faith for those who believe in the mother goddess hypothesis, but were they such for their makers? How do we even know if these statuettes and figurines were worshipped? Because a lot of the time they were actually found just thrown away. They weren't found typical like sanctuaries or religious areas. A lot of times they were in kind of garbage, trash heaps almost. So how can we even be sure that these figurines and figurettes had such worshipping powers to them?" So overall, after evaluating all of these different standpoints and moving from the original creation of this idea of the cult of the mother goddess and this mother goddess phenomena, I do not agree and do not believe that this was such a thing. I agree with Andrew Fleming in that I think that this was a myth that was created by archaeologists and anthropologists who were ignorant to the fact that their interpretations were coming from their own contemporary views on women, on women's bodies, on fertility and sexual organs, and they were ignorant in placing these ideas from the 1800s and 1900s on Neolithic periods, which firstly had no evidence at all to show that this was such a thing in that time, let alone the ignorant belief that what they understood and knew in their world in the 1800s and 1900s could be applicable to something from ancient society and from prehistory. Whilst there is an interesting amount of figurines that depict women with bodies that are similar or in positions that are similar, I don't think that this means that they were purely symbols of fertility in a matriarchal society based on just their body type. I think that there could be many interpretations to these figurines. I think that it's very reductive to think of them as solely fertile figures when there's a massive range of other things that they could have been representing. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And what Andrew Fleming ends with in his article, I will also end with in this video essay. "The mother goddess has detained us for too long. Let us disengage ourselves from her embrace." Thank you for listening. I'm Georgia Doyle, and that was my video essay on the mother goddess phenomena.